ecological footprint while maintaining and improving quality of life. So there's the challenge for sustainable infrastructure. Okay, so we got some additional challenges here as well. One I mentioned before, we're building 2050 today, and another thing I want to talk about is past is not prologue. What I mean by building 2050 today, if you look at, again, this difference in where the world is, we have one planet to work with, and we're using it up as if we had more than that in terms of planet Earths to work with. Each of these things that we do today is going to be long-lived. And so we better do it the best way we can in order to make sure that whatever we put in place today that's going to last 20, 30, 40 years is the best we can do. Now, the other thing is the past is not prologue. If you look at some of the situations, go back to that example of the power plants. If you're designing a power plant today, how are you going to deal with it? In the case of the Southwest US, where they're relying on river water coming in at a volume that they can use, at a temperature they can use, and that changes, then the whole design changes. And there's the problem. The infrastructure you're going to be designing today is going to be dealing with a whole new set of operating conditions that have now changed. And they're changing in terms of the mean, the variance, which is larger, and the extremes that you're going to have to cope with. So when you're doing this infrastructure, you're going to look at the key variables that you're designing by and say, oh my gosh, I can't go back to the handbook anymore. I better not. You know, what kind of things have changed and what do I need to do with them? And none of this is out there yet. I mean, this is all brand new kinds of things that engineers need to be considering in order to make some good judgments about how you design things. And this is not just confined to the US, this is across the world. So if you're designing anything, either you're going to think about this kind of variance and make some changes in the way you design, have a new engineering design paradigm, or else practice saying, gosh, client, I didn't realize it was going to change. I'm really sorry about that, but we're going to have to shorten the life of the project we told you was going to last 20, 30, 40 years. So there's the change that is going to make a difference. Now, get briefly into the infrastructure rating system. We have a group of people, ASCE being one of them that founded this, but the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure started this rating system just about a year ago now, and we combined it with some other organizations within the states, APWA, American Council of Engineering Companies, and then about 6 months ago we combined it. Harvard University was working with a founder, one of the foundations that run by Paul and Joan Zofnis, and so we created Envision, which is a combination of all these groups, and come up with a rating system. And the idea is that it covers infrastructure. We chose not to go for buildings and facilities, mainly because we didn't want to go head-to-head with LEED and try to fight that gorilla. But we did want to provide a sound basis for developing infrastructure and provide the necessary incentives. And so what we did, we asked a couple of key questions. Again, looking back at how you design infrastructure, it wasn't a question of, gee, did we do the project right? Do we have a lot of great new performance? We asked, is this the right project to do? If you think of some of the crazy things we've done, we've got a law saying you need to put ethanol in the fuels you use in gasoline, and that's corn-based, and the energy balance is either neutral or negative, so you say that's got to be the dumbest thing you ever heard of, but you know, that's the kind of thing we're doing. So we asked the engineering industry to say, look, let's question whether or not this project makes any sense. A road that has a lot of recycled concrete is great, but not if it causes urban sprawl. I mean, things like that is what you have to think about. We're looking at long-term costs and risks. There's a question of traps and vulnerabilities that people get into. If your tax base for building roads is based on an increase in the use of roads and gasoline, and you find out your city population is contracting, that's not a good thing. We also make restoration a particular element of this. It's not just doing things less bad, it's did you restore, did you start driving that bubble south as opposed to just doing it less bad and giving yourself pats on the back. And then we considered the changing operating conditions. And so there's where we want to reside in terms of that graphic for the projects. And that's it for now. We'll hopefully get some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Sorry, Bill. Guy is about to come up.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah. Again, a very interesting perspective. We're hearing about specific technologies that are going on in different countries. We're hearing about processes going on in different countries and around the world. Bill's perspective on sustainability on a global basis, I think, is a very interesting one as well. Now, Guy, I'm going to ask you if you would perhaps just give a quick picture of what's going on in Canada. And with that, and with the world tour that we've taken, prepare yourself for some commentary and dialogue with some with our panel. I think it should be quite interesting when we get to that. We'll do that after Guy had his opportunity to present his information, once we find it.
Be right after one of our American cousins, so I had to fly our flag high and bright. Just to add something, yes, Canada has a very strong participation in the pt2 for ISO 55000. The chair of our Canadian Mirror Committee is Duncan Ellison, who is the former executive director for the Canadian Water and Wastewater Association. And our vice chair is Steve Whiten from the city of Calgary. I am on the Mirror Committee with a number of people, and I'm also on the Working Group 1. For about the same reasons that RISE could not be here today, I'm not going to be able to go to Prague next week, because otherwise, if I had gone to Prague, I would have spent less than 4 days at home this month. It's really, I'm not going to deal with any technical issues, because this is a conference that you had a lot of opportunities to hear about, asset management and so on. But it's really to give you an overview of the journey of asset management. And I want to put a disclaimer, because I don't have the time to go into the history of asset management in Canada since 1993. So if I have forgotten any projects or omitted any person from my presentation, it is not intentional. It's probably because I'm starting to get either too old or too tired. Our journey begins about 4 or 5 years after the US. And if you remember back in 1981, there was a book that was published called America in Ruins, The Decaying Infrastructure. And that was kind of a wake-up call for a number of people in North America. And Canada followed back in 1985 with a report from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that was called Municipal Infrastructure in Canada, Physical Condition and Funding Adequacy, and probably should have been inadequacy at the time. But that really triggered the whole debate about infrastructure sustainability. So I'm going to go through a little timeline of what has happened. And really before 1993, for us that were working in the federal government at that time, any infrastructure research was underground, especially dealing with municipalities. Because at that time, at the federal government, you could not say that you were doing something for municipalities, because it was not the jurisdiction of the federal government to deal with municipal governments. So even organizations like the CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, had little groups of research doing, but probably in the basement someplace, and they didn't publish. But as of 1993, things changed. We changed governments, and we changed. And suddenly there was a greater focus on the federal government participating in finding solutions for municipalities. And we see a number of things that happened. National Research Council, my former employer, created the Urban Infrastructure Rehabilitation Research Program. About at the same time, there was a group that was created at the University of Waterloo to do with trenchless technologies. and it was direct involvement with trying to find solutions to municipal problems. In Montreal, we had about the same year the Center of Expertise and Research in Infrastructure in Urban Areas that was created. So a number of things that were happening. This was because of the awareness and the willingness for a number of players to start looking at infrastructure. In 1994, there was one large program, and if you remember 1994, you know, we were 1993, 1994, we were having high unemployment, and the federal government at that time decided to create a program which was called the Canada Infrastructure Works Program. And I'm just extracted from the report to Parliament for this, and you know, it said the infrastructure program is a major collaborative arrangement, and you know, from the federal government to say that they're collaborating with people, this is really great news. It wasn't, especially with municipal infrastructure in the past. That was not the trend. And it really involved the participation of three levels of government. So the federal, the provincial, and the municipal. This is the first time that there was a program that was tripartite. And actually, in later years, the Auditor General of Canada said that probably was the best way of creating programs. And of course, they were looking at it from the federal government perspective. Now, you have to realize that if the federal government gives you 33 cents to build infrastructure, the provincial gives you 33 cents, and you put your own 33 cents as a municipality, the federal government is going to recover 33 cents from the projects through income tax, through all kind of excise taxes, and so on. So there was no net loss from the federal government to invest in those programs. The provincial governments probably recovered about 50% of their investment, and then municipalities got to buy infrastructure at 33 cents on the dollar. Win-win-win situation. So that was the start of all the series of infrastructure programs that we saw until today and continue. They just changed the name. After Canada Infrastructure Works Program, it became the Infrastructure Canada Program. After the Infrastructure Canada Program, it became an acronym soup. There was the Municipal Rural Infrastructure Fund, there was the Canada Strategic Infrastructure Fund, there was the Border Infrastructure Fund, and I could continue. And then we changed governments, and they didn't like the names, but they liked the programs, so they put them all together, and they created the Build Canada Fund. They're the same programs. Why do they continue to exist? And Mr. President, can I switch my hat real quick?
For a moment.
Because, you know, those programs are high visibility programs. The stimulus program had more than 10,000 projects. Now realize, and I'm talking you know, from a political hat now, this is fantastic exposure because for every project, there are 3 announcements. You announce the funding, you announce the shovel, okay, the first shovel on the ground, and you announce the closing of the project, you know, the cutting of the ribbon. So imagine that for these 10,000 projects, there were 30,000 announcements across the country. So high visibility. So these programs are here to stay. Even though they're going to change names, they will be tripartite. In 1995 to 2000, it was really the mobilization